formally introduce you, Joel, Mr. Joel Hefner. And I've known Joel, how long would you say?
Almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years. And Joel logged his time in as a New York City teacher. He and I were chatting over the weekend briefly about tonight. And I believe you said you've been a teacher for 28 years, were a teacher for 28.
Yep. Social studies teacher, middle schools.
And that was a good training ground for what came later, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And I describe you as a former teacher, staff developer, curriculum developer, technology integrationist, which I think is a great term for the role. We didn't use it in New York City, but I've seen it used in many other districts. And above all, an education enthusiast and advocate. And we will take a look a little later on at some of the free resources that Joel has developed and that are freely available for teachers to use online. And he put some work into them and a lot of experience uh, experience-born wisdom. And so before we get into any of this, I'm just going to put you on the spot, Joel. Considering you're a retiree, why do you continue to do this?
That's simple. It's fun.
It's fun.
The same reason that I was doing it 30 years ago when I was working with you. It was fun. I always have the policy that if the teacher is having a good time, the kids are going to have a good time because it's going to brush off. And I just continued it for the past 30 years too.
Well, I'm not surprised that you gave me the simplest and best answer I could hope for. And, I remember back in the day, I was a teacher too in New York City. I did that for 18 years. And back in those days, we used to punch a time card in the main office. And when I did that, I was reminded of the similarity in some ways of being a factory worker, a coal miner. And
Yes.
I bring this up because some teachers, some of the people I knew, it was, I gotta punch in by 8:40 and I can't leave the building till 3 o'clock. It's kind of like a factory worker not enjoying the job. And then there were many who really found something to love about it and not just taking care of the kids, really intellectually as well. So yeah, good answer because it's fun. Okay, so to my students, each semester I teach this course, I like to touch on a little bit of the history of educational technology. So I'm going to talk about Project Smart Schools. And you remember Project Smart Schools, Joel.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun and it was kind of scary, gratifying, satisfying, overwhelming fun. So anyhow, this is a screenshot I took. I'm really happy I found this for this discussion. This is this is an archive of the ongoing press releases from the mayor's office, and this goes way back really to 1997. And Mayor Giuliani launched Project Smart Schools. Every sixth, seventh, and eighth grade classroom in New York City was going to get computers by mid 1998. And I'll flesh the story out a little bit. Part of this was $100 million to be spent over 5 years to accomplish that, and and also money set aside to relieve 100 teachers who knew how to use computers, people like you, to go out into the school system and show other teachers how to use the computers. Anything you'd like to add to that description of Project Smart Schools?
I think that the most interesting part was that they were supposed to hire these people, and the only thing that they neglected was to tell them what they were supposed to do. Because at that time, when I got started, during the summer that it started, they had one stream of people using Windows computers and one using Apple computers. And I decided to go out and get Apple Works, which I had never heard of before that, so that I could use the Apple computers. And it was bewildering when we got started with Project Smart, how many districts decided to mandate that teachers had to use the computers in their rooms. And incidentally, there were only four in each room. It wasn't a class full. And they didn't bother telling us how we were supposed to do it. And,
Yeah, and
and that's where our job came in, to figure out a way to use those computers.
well said. So this goes back to a time when teachers really had no idea what they could do with it. And a lot of them thought, well, I teach science. I teach social. Why am I teaching these kids how to use computers, which was all wrong. And I'm just going to briefly touch on this, Joel. Yes, I became the head of Project Smart Schools, which involved all, I don't know, 350 middle schools. That's a lot of schools and a lot of teachers. But before I was put in charge of it, I didn't hire you originally.
Nope.
Where did they place Project Smart Schools? Which umbrella did it come under?
It was the other division that had ownership of the equipment. They were deemed to be the experts in the equipment, but they weren't really educator kind of people. They were techie people.
Yeah. Originally, the people in charge of the school system said, "Oh, computers, great. I don't even remember who it was at that time. It might have been Miss Taylor way back when. But at any rate, these are the people who were buying equipment and, maintaining the server and running the email system and that kind of thing. Uh, and they were beyond clueless. And so an unheard of thing happened. This project was given over to the division of curriculum and instruction where I was working, running a few offices. An unheard of politically thing to do, to take a $100 million project from one side of the school system, take it away from them and give it to someone else. And while the other side of the house was beyond clueless, our side was clueless because nobody knew what to do, because Project Smart heralded in, I call it a hyper significant shift. Before that, anything having to do with computers in the school. By the way, any of my students, jump in, make a comment, ask a question. It'll be welcomed by Joel and myself. At any rate, the idea was, in the high schools, you had career and technical ed classes, and in the middle schools and some elementary schools, you had the computer classroom and the computer teacher, and Lord knows what they did in there. They learned keyboarding and they played Oregon Trail and I don't know what else. It was totally divorced from the general instructional program, except in really rare cases. So Project Smart was a big difference in that all of a sudden the idea was we're going to shift away from teaching students about technology to showing the system how to teach students with, in other words, how to make math and language arts, science and social studies and on better by applying computers to the subjects across the curriculum. And at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, Joel, everyone was using hard copy textbooks.
You mean that they aren't using it still? What else could we possibly do?
Well, as per a previous session in this class, they're using things that really amount to digital versions of the textbook, and those digital versions do some pretty amazing things. It's true, but it's really the same approach. Anyhow, I thought I would introduce this article. I don't even know if you've seen this one. I share this every semester. This is from the Times, and the title was How Google Took Over the Classroom. And this is dated from 2017, but it really is worth all of my students wrapping your brain around the gist of this that I'm going to give, and maybe Joel will flesh out. Before Google, mm, okay, let me put it this way. Google gave away all of the tools, the word processing, the Google Slides, the spreadsheet, and on and on and on. That's free. And before that, Joel, I believe schools had to buy each piece of software.
Well, there were all kinds of, the board used to get school-wide licenses, but it was all disjointed because the system was always divided between the Windows side and the Apple side. So when Google came in, it was supposed to be a universal thing to get everybody involved. My problem with Google all the time has been it's not used that much outside of education. So are you training people to use something that is not going to be applicable later on, as opposed to training them to use the Windows fleet of software? I understand that money is a real issue, but I never wrap my hands around Google. It's I'm old and it's hard to change after all these years. But if if it's not going to be used later on, then you're really setting people back. It really should be something that will be used later on.
Well, you touch on a good point. We're not going to go too far down that road. And I would say if kids know how to use a word processor and a slide presentation resource, hopefully they will look at these things kind of generically. But you reminded me of how many times did and by the way, these things weren't compatible. Everyone used Microsoft back then. And if you bought Microsoft for Windows, by accident, you couldn't use it in your Macintosh computers, at least not in the earlier days. But the real point of this was that Google had developed this Chromebook, which was a godsend in a sense because it was cheap. And before that, do you remember uh, that every single computer was a precious item? You know, what did they have in the classrooms before these little uh, scaled down notebook connected devices.
In, in the school that I was in, and this goes back way back before the Chromebooks, Apple II computers were very frequently found, and they were in different editions. There was the Apple II and the Apple Plus and the Apple IIc. And the most difficult part for me was to make the transition over to Windows ultimately, because I liked using the Apple system. I always thought that Apple was going to be the one who was going to win. I was slightly wrong now that they only have 10% of the market share, but that's just the way it is.
I
They
think,
were wise to bring
yeah,
on the Windows Office suite, so that kind of evened things out. But I never could understand how they Windows won way back then. Silly of
well,
me.
I think everyone thought that Apple was going to win because it was such, like you say, fun. I remember reading something about Windows is serious business, but your Apple is your friend. I mean, it was a very human thing. But the ultimate point here is they were expensive. You know, those four computers in each of the middle school classrooms or the designated classroom, they were thousands of dollars, you know.
Mhm.
And so to answer the question in brief, how Google took over the classroom, they gave away the software so that they could sell these inexpensive sub notebook Chromebooks, maybe that's not the right term, but scaled down, inexpensive connected devices. And that really was this, all of a sudden, all sorts of classrooms could have class sets. That really was a sea change and made a great difference. All right, again, I think understanding a little of the history is a good thing. It helps us understand where we're at. And Joel, you lived through this. And so we were saying that um, no one, no one in these hard copy, textbook driven classrooms had any idea what to do with these computers. And so our group basically was in charge of inventing what to do and sharing it with we were supposed to share it with the middle schools. But after a while, we turned the professional development over to everyone, and they responded, elementary and even high school as well. So, so now I want to jump to student publishing. And, I'd like to frame it this way, that of the many things we discovered, and we were a group of five, there were five of you. There were five full-time, I'll call you a professional developer, curriculum developer. You would go out into the schools. We would host large trainings, invite people out of the schools to these common places, some training site that we set up to host, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 teachers from different schools. And we did a half dozen Saturday extravaganzas called Tech to Go, where we would get on their own time, uncompensated. Teachers were curious and hungry for direction. We would do that on a Saturday. They would show up, 1,000, 1,200, kind of amazing.
Just
Yeah.
one thing I
Yeah,
wanted to
please.
add, when you mentioned about the initial group of people, the initial desire was for over 100 people to be hired. The Board of Ed could only get 13 who were on the original group of people. So now we think of, oh, everybody's interested in technology. They could only get 13 people who was semi-qualified because there was nobody who was qualified, because no one had ever done this before. So it was only 13 who that was whittled down to five that were allowed to work at the central board to basically teach the whole system basically what to do. Interesting numbers.
It was an interesting challenge, and so I was the captain of that little ship, and it's quite an adventure. And we made many discoveries. So now I segue to student publishing, Joel, because of the many ways that we discovered and promoted for these thousands of teachers throughout the school system. And really, we were addressing tens of thousands of teachers. Of the many ways we discovered and developed and promoted, um, for my money, student publishing is the most promising. And it's kind of a sad tale because I'll still stand by that, but I have to admit it didn't take nearly as well as it should have. And student publishing predates computers. You know, there were some teachers publishing books in magazines and other things with their students and using typewriters and Xerox machines and Rexograph machines. I'm not even going to go into what that is. A lot of purple ink way back when. But when we were looking at practices that could be adopted to promote the use of technology, we could see the the word processing and the desktop publishing and the printers and all of that, it was a natural fit. And we got a lot of interest. I think this is one of our most popular workshops because it was cross curricular too. Any further thoughts on that?
The basic concept really that developed in the early days was when PDF files came into being. And now they could make a PDF file that could be read on any computer, and you could say that whatever the document was a book that they referred to as an ebook. So that I think was a major step forward in what we did and what everybody else was doing. But PDF, it was truly a remarkable thing that they would allow that to go into the world and anybody could use it, and anybody now can still use it.
Good point. And so that portable document file, portable downloadable, I don't know that we ever decided the exact definition of the D, but pretty soon everyone was on email. So you could share these books, you could publish these books, you could distribute them, you could send them out to parents and beyond. It was really quite a great potential. So I put a few things here and just to explain that this idea of student publishing is favored. I don't know what standards you may be on now, but the Common Core standards for English were the standard of the standards for a long time. And, they directly asked for a student publishing in language arts and literacy across history, social studies, science. They wanted publishing, And here it is, use technology, including the internet, to produce and publish writing as well as to interact and collaborate with others. So this is not a radical thought. This is simply doing what the top level of professional organizations called for and state departments of ed. And here's the National Council of Teachers of English. That's the premier language arts professional organization, I believe. And so here's an item I found from their journal, their magazine, and here's an article. Student Literary Magazine takes students from writers to authors. So they were keen on this. And the illustration accompanying the article has all of these samples of, uh, of student writing published in class. And so, okay, so another item I wanted to throw in is the writing process. So, the writing process is a way to wrap our brains around teaching and learning to write. And it's related to other kinds of teaching and learning, scientific method, design process, design thinking. I did this book for ISTE about student creativity, and I kind of adapted all that to create a creativity process that I put in the book. So process is a good tool, and this has been around for decades and decades. There's a writing process, pre-writing, which is getting brainstorming your ideas and maybe outlining them, drafting, taking a first crack at it, revising it, editing it. The point here really is that this culminates, it all leads up to publishing. Step five is publishing, something that needs to be covered in the teaching of writing, but up until technology, publishing meant uh, producing your cleanest copy and taking it home to mom and dad so they could put it on the refrigerator door with a magnet. And the technology changed all that. Classes of kids could produce professional looking things, and that's highly motivating and engaging. And so a lot was written about this. Here is an article, Reimagine the Writing Process, consider how the integration of technology can expand how you define the process and product of writing in your classroom. So we weren't the only ones. A lot of people, we might have been among the first, but this became a thing. But we really couldn't get a lot of teachers to continue doing it. And so now we come to AI. And I don't know if you used AI in your writing, Joel.
I refer to it sometimes. I never use it. I refer to it. It's a very good library in the sense of the old time library where you can go to get reference. The unfortunate part is that you can turn the reference into writing and then take credit for it instead of just looking at finding the facts. Because when you're doing, let's say, historical research, it would take hours, if not days, to find what they can come up with in seconds. But it's up to you to put it in the proper context. And that, I think, is where AI gets the criticism. It's too good at what it does, and too many people take advantage of what it can do.
Well said. So, I mean, I don't much favor it. And the reason I don't is because before this came out, I had written and published 14 books and 100 art. It's like I'm already the guy who put in the 10,000 hours, and I just assume use my comfort level with it to do it the classic way. But of course, all people are now first coming to writing, and it's natural that they turn to whatever tools are available. Here's a couple of items I found from professional writing coaches. People hire them to teach them to write and get published. But these people talk about intuition, that what a good professional writer who sells needs is to develop their writing intuition, something that's very human and that can't come when you're only using a, a tech tool like AI. This one, unleashing creativity, the power of intuition in writing. And lastly, I found this just yesterday. This is an article from Technology and Learning. Uh, and this centerpiece here is a screenshot I took. This is from Lisa Nielsen, who's a one of the guiding lights on the use of technology in the New York City public school system. And she talks about the new writing process in the age of AI. And I'm glad she's making a reference to the classic writing process. And she lists, I believe it's 6 steps, uh, which are similar, but she relies a lot, I believe, on AI. But I like that among her steps, and so this is a direct quote, she labels this human editing and decision making, where the human writer takes control back and exercises the ultimate decision over what's in the writer's writing. And she says, I revise in Google Docs and ensure the tone and clarity reflect my thinking. Well said, Lisa. So, yeah, I think we're still figuring all of this out. I thought I'd show when we discussed this over the weekend, Joel, and I told you I really liked the subject of student publishing in class, and you said you did too, but unfortunately, it's a hard sell to get teachers to do it. Um, I thought yes, but there are examples we can point to. So I thought before we get to your resources, in just a minute or two, I'd quickly show this. So this is from EduBlogs. So this, in the beginning, some teachers used Google Blogger. This is part of the Google suite now. And there was some pushback because people were worried about, is that secure? Is it appropriate? Uh, that even started before Google Classroom. And so some groups like EduBlogs came out and said, well, we'll provide resources to teachers, just to teachers. That's our focus. We want teachers to publish to provide a blog, a web presence for their classroom, and we want them to use it if they like to publish their students' work. It's always hard to figure out where you're going to post the student work. So, and they give these examples. Here's one I found, Mrs. Moore's class in Arizona, just a regular public school. And she has a bunch of student writing. In this particular case, they used one of the comic generators to create a kind of graphic novel project. So, and there are other examples. which you can find at this. Did I give a link? I'm giving it at the bottom of the notes. Yeah, so there are other examples. If you go to EduBlogger, they have a whole raft of examples of teacher classroom blogs. And here's something from middle school. This is Ditmas in Brooklyn, Joel.
Yes, it is.
Did you teach there?
1 year.
Yeah, right. And that's a a regular middle school. It's not a special school. And here's a book they put out, and I give a link to this one. This is classroom work using oral history as a vehicle for studying ourselves in contemporary history. So these teachers at Miss assign these kids to go home and out into the neighborhood and interview people and write that up. That's great literacy activities, and they cleaned it up. They did the word processing. And I mean, here's an example interview with my dad by an eighth grader. And this book, I believe, is, I don't know how many pages. Well, it's dozens and dozens and dozens of pages of student work, and that's student artwork. So, yeah, there are definitely teachers who publish their students' writing online. This particular piece uses a platform called Scribe. There are many similar ones. So here's a quote from Joel Hefner, because you used to say this all the time in our little team, and I thought this was a good thing you said. Every kid should write a book at some point in his education.
You know,
Um,
one thing
Still
I
feel that
want,
way? Yeah.
oh, definitely. One thing I wanted to point out, though, when you're talking about middle school 62, a lot depends on who is in charge of the school. Because the year that I was in that school, nothing would have been done like this. It took an innovative principal to come in and change the whole way that the school operated. So a lot of it depends on, it's good to have the principal do it, or it's also good to have individual people do it. But somebody has to step up and move forward and not wait for others to lead them. Because if you wait, sometimes you can live your whole life and you'll never end up doing anything. So Ditmas is really a really good example. When I was there, it, the principal didn't care about most of the school. He only cared about the SP classes. The rest of the school could have rotted. And then when there was a change of administration, things changed completely.
Well, that's well said and a great point. And I mean, I think this is fantastic. I mean, this is just me talking, but you said shouldn't every kid write a book or a chapter or a page of a book or a magazine? Yes, why wouldn't you want to do that? We continually present kids with material, and we talk about, oh, this is great. It's a published book. It's published magazine. It's authoritative. It's having a voice in the real world that's heard. And to my way of thinking, why wouldn't you want to do this? This shouldn't just be an exceptional thing. This should be part of not every lesson, not every project, maybe once a year, at least once, if you're in a middle school for 3 years, at least once, participate in conceiving and executing a book, publishing it, and get it online, get some feedback. So we'll look at your resources in a second, but uh, I wanted to point out that we hear this over and over and over again. Technology enables students to move beyond being content consumers to being content creators, but doesn't really happen often enough. Okay, so these are some of the things that Joel has created and put up on the web for anyone to use, including, sorry, I have a hyperactive cursor. Okay, so what is this Story Starter Junior?
Well, this was part, there's a non-junior part. There's a story starter, which is currently offline and will be going back online in the next couple of weeks. That's why I put this one on just to show. People tend to think that getting started is the hardest part. If you click on where it says that prompt, new prompt, one of about 8 billion possible story starters will come up. You can use one like the one that you see on the screen, or click it and another one will come up. And most of them are what most people think are silly, and they are. But they also, if you use them, you got to be really creative to find a way to make sense out of it. The curious robot, that's kind of an unusual way to get started. And the other 8 billion, and I know that there are 8 billion because I actually have counted them in an interesting way. That's one way of getting people to write. And it came out in 2003 when I left the board because I wanted to have something that would be fun. And it, it, it struck a lot of people as being an interesting thing. It became one of the top 100 writing sites for Writer's Digest magazine 6 times. So it took on something. The unfortunate part is that very few teachers have ever used it. As much as have tried
Well,
to promote it, very few people have used it.
it makes great sense to me. And yes, for many writers, and particularly new writers, that first idea, that first prompt, that first line is quite a barrier. And, I guess if you don't like the first one, you can keep going till one of them grabs you. We talk about student voice and choice, one of the overarching um, sayings, beliefs in progressive education. This is the embodiment of that. Keep going, pick one, choose one, and then lend your voice to it. So you could write the rest of your story right in that field. Or, I mean, I did this after you shared it with me. I wrote I don't know, 150 words. Um, what I did was I simply opened up a word processing document and lifted that prompt, fleshed it out, and then pasted it back in. And so then what happens? You save it, print it. What do you get? What happens?
Whatever you want. That's the whole thing. It, the original intent was if you have a class and you assign them a subject, you're going to end up with 30 of the same things or 25 of the same things. Here, you can have, not can, but you'll have 25 different things. And my idea of all of these things is God forbid if a child shows another child their story and they say, "Oh, you did that? Well, let me show you what I can do." Because when I was a teacher, I hate to say this, I hated to collect 30, or in my case, 150 things from 5 different classes and have to read them. That was mind-boggling. But here, if you can take something like this and put it together on a website with each kid's name and a link to it, they would share it, or at least in my silly opinion, they might share it. It's a better thing than handing out papers, having them handed back to you, and then no one's ever going to see it. If you can get it online, now you've got a chance of really doing something. And it doesn't have to be a lot, even if it's just one paragraph. It's a possibility to generate interest in writing and being creative and showing off, because I think that that's equally important to the writing part, is that they could show the other people, because some of these kids have never shown anybody. I mean, you mentioned before the refrigerator, putting, hanging things up. Assuming that the child takes something home and shows it to a parent and they hang it up, then you have two, three, five people who might see it. Grandma's not going to see it unless grandma comes in from California. This way, if you can put it online in a class site, everybody can see it and share it. And they can tell Uncle Phil in Missouri, that they have something and they have written it and they have published it. So all of these things were part of my own desire to have people write. And when I say publish, I really mean publish, because putting it online, even using Blogger, it's free. It's possible to do all these things. And if you ask, you said how much could they do? If a teacher did it as a year-long project and ended up making a class yearbook or something with a name like that, people would appreciate it, and it would be something to refer to uh, for years to come. Blogger has been around a long time, and it's still there. And the blogs that people made 20 years ago are still there in the same place. So it's a potential.
Guilty as charged. I have some. Uh, I had so many, I've forgotten all of them.
Me
Uh,
too.
so when you save it, you get a link. Is that the way this works?
Well, no, this is strictly an individual thing. What I'm saying is that you can use the product itself and
Ah,
create a website that is separate. If you create a Blogger page, you can have as many pages as you want, and they can be linked together. So if each child has an individual page, you can literally put on one page every child's name with a link to their page on Blogger or anything else, or whatever the school site might be.
or their pseudonym, right? For security, their
Well,
nickname or
I'm very big on security. I always warn people about not using names or full names, and never having a picture and a name online with or without permission. And the other thing is, if you decide to use any of those things, please don't say, Joel said that I can do it. You always have to refer to the principal, and make sure that you're following school guidelines, because Joel said something, it doesn't count. Because some
yes.
people may be offended by that, and they might question rights, because there's all kinds of technicalities involved. But it's something to try, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about your story starter is, I like the fact that kids can do it independently. Show them how to use it once. maybe there's a scenario in which some kid finishes something before the rest of the class. It's kind of self-directing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in it. Okay, so here we have well, what's the name of this? This is online and available too.
This is I made it in PowerPoint, but it can be made in any slide thing. It's an eight page, as you might say, book that you can fold together. It's hard to see it, but it's literally something that you can hold in your hand. And it's only on one sheet of paper. And I have the template. You can look at it online. And when you fold it together, and there are instructions even on how to fold it together, you can literally write a book. It's the basic thing of my own idea of anybody being able to write a book. A book, as I discovered when I looked at this in the beginning, there's no definition of what a book is. Most people think, well, you have to have 200 pages or 300 pages. Who said so? If you can fold it together and have 8 pages, as I like to think of it, you have a book. Most people consider them to be zines, but I like to say that they're mini books. And it's something that using the template, the hardest part about it is that the top row has to be upside down. And using your PowerPoint, it's very simple to move the box around so that you can type it easily. Or if you fold it the way the directions tell you to, you can do it by hand and just write it, and you can make it as an artwork. And again, it becomes your own book. And with a copy machine or a printer, whatever you have, you can distribute that, and it's one piece of paper, and you've got what I like to think of as a mini book. And you can say that I wrote a book today.
Well, I get your vision that everybody can write a book, maybe not a great book, but everyone should have the experience of not just conceiving this, but writing it, publishing it, sharing it, and you've made that easy and doable. And so now we have the Fountain script editor.
Well, this is something that I've only recently become interested in. I always wanted to know how movies were written and what format that they're written. And they're actually written, if you scroll down a little bit on this, you'll see the format that they're actually appear in. And in order to do it, there are some very sophisticated applications that can cost a couple of $100s. It turns out that you can do it for free. Because if you use any word processor or text editor and use the syntax that is referred to as the fountain syntax, and then open it in something like this, it'll format it to look like a script. So to me, the first time I did a script when I was in the classroom, I wrote it out as the character's name and the lines that they would write. And then the next line would be the character names and the line that they would write. This, however, looks like a real script, and you can make it just using a text editor. If you're using Notepad or the editor that comes with the Macs, it's remarkably simple, and you don't need anything. I put this together just to make it easy for a teacher or a student to use because there are many different editors that are using what they call this fountain syntax. And you can look up uh, the word fountain and application, and you can see a lot of them. This one, I think, is the simplest to use, and you can save it as a PDF, which is the standard for movie scripts, or as a text file, which is the way it would appear as the top boxes, or in HTML if you wanted to put it online. Again, it's not the greatest thing since chicken soup, but it's something that's different. And you always want to have something that's a little bit different. If you did this once a year, it would be something that would be unique. If you did the little book once a year, that's something that would be unique. Anything that you do that is special, I would not say that you make this into a weekly activity because then it becomes boring. But if you can introduce a little bit of creativity each time, you'd be surprised. You know, it's like Everett Dirksen said, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Before you know it, it's real money. That's the way I look at things. If you do something once in a while and it becomes interesting, that's all you would need. When I started teaching, they told me about you have to have a motivation at the beginning of the class. So I'll just tell you one quick story. I'm observed one day, and the assistant principal and I have a conference, and one of the points that she put down as commendable was you elicited the aim of the lesson. And one of the suggestions, which was the criticism, was it took you too long. Like I was supposed to know how long it was going to take to elicit an aim of something. Well, this is a motivation that's intrinsic in what you're doing. If you say, uh, let's let's write a script or have the kids come up to the front and read it, it's got to be better than me telling them about, George Washington or Christopher Columbus. That's the way as I said at the very beginning, I always wanted to do something that was fun for me because it turns out every time I did something that was fun for me, it was fun for them. So I guess we were always on the same page. I knew that if I did something that I thought was boring, no matter what I would try to do, I couldn't make it, interesting. So I always try to find something that was interesting to me. And if it was interesting to me, it usually worked pretty well.
Yeah, well, it's all about engagement, that's for sure. So, and I've thrown some additional resources in, but thanks for sharing the items you created, and thanks for creating them. I mean, if we had more people focusing on what will work in our classrooms, and you understand classrooms, 28 years in inner city. And where did you taught at Ditmas and elsewhere in Brooklyn, I guess?
Yes, I taught in the first school that I taught in was uh, in what was considered to be a very low functioning area. Ditmas was considered to be kind of a little step up. And then finally, I taught in Dyke, which was considered to be a step up. The interesting thing that I will tell you is I taught gifted children as well as everybody else. I taught them basically the same thing. The only thing I did with the gifted was I would go one step further because they would be able to appreciate it. But the content was always the same.
Well, I ask you because I've come to know that the foundation underlying all of the things you did when you were working with me and these things you put online is that this is for the classic, typical rank and file. Anybody anybody might end up teaching in classroom, and that makes this all the more valuable. So let me just say before we go, Joel, I was lucky to inherit you, and I learned a lot from you 25 years ago, and I'm still learning. So thanks a lot for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm sure my students do too.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay. In fact, I